In this lesson, I wanted to talk real briefly about some of the common terms that you'll hear throughout this course. The first one I'm sure most of you know, or first couple actually, I'm sure most of you know, but for those who don't, I just wanted to give a quick overview, and that is, what is raster and what is vector? Quite simply, raster is pixels. You talk about raster, that is a bitmap, and it is an image comprised of pixels. Vector is mathematical calculations. Because raster is comprised of pixels, the computer has already generated a certain amount of pixels in the image for whatever size of image you have. If you scale down a raster image, Photoshop will essentially remove pixels that it doesn't need anymore for that scaled down version of an image. If you enlarge an image, you'll notice that it becomes blurry usually, and that's because Photoshop's doing its best guess to fill in the pixels that were never there before. Now vector, because it's based on mathematical calculations, will always have smooth edges. It's basically just using a formula to figure out where the curves and the lines and the edges all are supposed to be. There's a lot of stuff out there that will give you full definitions between raster and vector if you really are having a hard time understanding that. Next, we have anti-alias. I know there's a lot of people who have questions about what anti-aliasing is, and I'll do my best to break it down as simply as possible right here. Essentially, what anti-aliasing does is it smooths the jagged appearance of your diagonal lines and your curved lines. So if you have aliased lines, they will look jagged and pixelated. And this only applies to bitmap or raster images. And here's an example that I put together to kind of demonstrate that. On the left, you can see we have aliased images. The aliased images have sharp, jagged edges. And on the bottom part of this example, you can see the zoomed in version of an aliased A. On the right hand side, you see the zoomed in version of an anti-aliased A. Now what anti-aliasing does is essentially the system will fill in some shades of gray around the edges here to give it a smooth appearance from a zoomed out perspective. So zoomed out, you can see it looks smooth. You can't really tell that those gray pixels are there. And that's what anti-aliasing does. Opacity, most of you know what that is. Here's a quick example of opacity. Opacity simply refers to the transparency or translucent value of an object or an image. In this example, you can see I have an orange circle and a green circle that are set with 100% opacity, which when something is 100% opaque, you cannot see through it. We reduce the opacity to 80%, like the example on the right, and now you can see the background through it a little bit, and you can see the green circle through it a little bit. This would be a little bit translucent. Transparent would be something that's you just can't, you can see all the way through. And translucent is something you can partially see through. Next we have tablet pressure and sensitivity. I just wanted to touch on that because it's referred to in a lot of the tools options. And what that's going to do is it applies to the size and the opacity of tablet pressure. Some of you may not be doing any work on tablets and you're just using a PC, so this may not apply to you, but some of you are using a Wacom tablet or a full-on just tablet. When you're using your stylus, the tablet pressure sensitivity will be able to affect the size of your brush, the thickness and width, and you can also set it to affect the opacity, meaning the harder you push, the more it affects the opacity of your line or your stroke. What this is going to do is this allows for artwork to become more natural looking. It allows for more realistic brush strokes. When you have a line that starts thin, gets thicker, and narrows out as you release the pressure, that's more like a real brush. Then we have the airbrush. If you're familiar with physical airbrushes outside the digital world, then you should have no trouble grasping what the airbrush is in Photoshop. Simply put, it works like an actual airbrush. If you're holding the button down, you are spraying. You are essentially painting. Whether you're moving the mouse or not, the paint will flow anyways. It will become darker, it will become heavier. The slower you move, the heavier the paint is. So if you just imagine using a spray paint can or an airbrush and moving along while you're pressing the nozzle or pressing the button that releases paint, it just works just like that. And this is an option that you can turn on and off in several of your different brushes. Okay, that's all there. There's a lot of other terms to know, but I wanted to just cover a few of those because they are more common and they get referred to a lot, and just want to make sure that everybody understands what those things are. Shoot me some comments if you have other terms or anything that you're not clear on or you just would like to have included in this course. Thank you. See you in the next lesson.